After seeing how the red pill community tried to take over the Matrix, I started to realize that most people don't even fundamentally understand the plot of the film or the trilogy at all. And even more damaging is a lot of people want to take the first movie and isolate it from the other two, when in reality you do not get a full picture of what the Matrix is, nor how to escape it if you're listening to what these groups have to say about it. Because the truth is Neo never escaped from the Matrix, and he realizes that towards the end of the third film. So right off the bat, I know this is going to frustrate a lot of people hearing this, but hear me out. I'm going to provide plenty of evidence from the films as well as philosophically. I know that some other channels have talked about this concept, but that's just because this is the plot of the film. And this is going to be just one video in a series talking over the plot of the Matrix, how it applies to our lives. Do we have a Matrix, and what does that look like? And the trilogy has hints of this trickled all throughout it, but a lot of people overlooked it. And as the series goes on, it becomes more and more apparent that Neo never escaped. He just broke into a different layer of the Matrix. What's actually happening in the films is that the machines have built a Matrix that is housing humans. We'll get into later videos, they might not even be humans, this might be a simulation they're running. But we see that they have humans trapped in these pods. But we see that Neo, as well as others, are presumably kept in these pods, injected into an artificial world. But what if their pod existence is also part of the Matrix? The machines have designed the Matrix in order for humans to not escape. And not only do they not want them to escape, they don't even want them to know that they're inside of a Matrix. The architect talks about how originally they made it perfect. They had a perfect world. The Matrix was a place of peace and prosperity, but humans slowly started to reject this. And they realized over time that humans did need duality and a bit of chaos with their peace in order for them to better control them. And right off the bat, it's a fundamental misunderstanding that the machines have about humans. They think that we like chaos, and what it really is that if people are safe and happy and have time, they will sit around and they will think about their existence, which is exactly what they don't want you to do in the Matrix, or in the Matrix that we're trapped in our world, which would look like how the rich and governments oppress people. So the machines don't want people to escape, so they create this Matrix that they hope that we will want to stay in or be so distracted in that we never think about, is there something greater than this? But like the architect says in the second movie, they understand that this is a flawed system and that they're still refining it. So of course humans are always going to try to escape. You're always going to have a small population like the rebels we see in the film who want to break out and they want to find out what's outside of the Matrix. And this very much ties into Plato's allegory of the cave, which I will go into in a separate video. So the machines know that there are humans that will try to break out. It's inevitable. And so they prepare for that. That's why they have agents that fight back against you. But if the machines know that there are humans that will try to break out of the Matrix and that they have a chance at fighting against these agents, or at least sliding past their detection, why wouldn't they make a Matrix inside of a Matrix? And that way people think that they broke out, they get to feel empowered by that, and then they go into the system of constantly fighting agents. And so a lot of their time is spent spinning their wheels instead of making real change. Or better yet, finding an exit. Which is very similar to the Rick and Morty episode where they have a simulation inside of a simulation. Because a lot of people think that once you cross the fence, you've escaped, that that's the inside and that's the outside. And once they get over there, they're free. And this is a flaw with people. We have a black and white thinking a lot of times, probably because we live so hard in duality. And the machines exploit this. And there's a bunch of evidence for this in the movie, because ultimately they do let Neo escape. In the first film, the agents put that tracking module in him, but then he goes and meets with Trinity and APOC and Switch. And the machines don't track him to that location. They don't do anything to really try to stop him from breaking out of the Matrix. Also, when Neo does get out of his pod, we have this one machine that comes over and it disconnects him from all of his hoses and dumps him. And while this is probably a program they would run for a human that's deceased, don't you think that this advanced technology would be able to read if he's sitting there and alive and moving and have some kind of procedure like that? Like, it should have popped his head right off when it grabbed him by the neck, if they know that these rebels are getting out and they don't want them to. And also, why could the pod open in the first place? If they never want humans to come outside of it, why is it not welded shut? Realistically, if the machines knew that the only humans coming out of these pods were going to be deceased ones, well, they would have blades at the bottom, and once they became aware, or if they passed away, they would just blend them up like a margarita, shoot that out, and then that would feed the other humans. And so right off the bat, there's a system in place that helps humans get out of these pods. Now, why would that happen if they really wanted to keep them in? And that's not the only hint in the first film that they are inside of the Matrix still. We also have that conversation with Neo and Mouse. And Mouse is trying to talk to him about, does this meal taste like chicken? We don't know what chicken even tastes like, because their basis of what chicken tastes like came from the Matrix. And the same is true for the idea of them escaping the Matrix. The only things that they know about outside of the Matrix were things that they were told. Like Neo was told what year it was by Morpheus, but we know later on that the things that Morpheus has been telling Neo were told to him by the Oracle, who's also a program who's working with the architect, and we'll get back to their conversation in a little bit. So they don't even know what it's like being outside. They don't know what the real world is, or if there even is a real world. For all they know, they could be a simulation, or humans didn't exist before these machines and they have created these biological beings that they call humans. There's also a flaw with the entire idea with Neo being the One. Morpheus tells him that he's the One. He thinks that he's some kind of reincarnation of the original person who broke out of the Matrix. But Morpheus tells Neo that this man who broke outside of the Matrix, he had the power to control the Matrix while he was inside of it, and he broke himself out just by desire alone, and then he was able to free others. So why did they have to break Neo out of the Matrix to begin with? If he actually is the One, and we saw that he was already on a path to discovering that he was inside of a Matrix, then he would have been able to will himself out of it. And how does that affect his path when he is dictated everything by Morpheus? So he's not making decisions like the original person that broke out. He's now doing what he's told, and all of that information is just a delineation of information from the Oracle. And the Oracle is not a good program, and ultimately the Oracle is not their ally. Her job is to create a matrix that the humans want to stay in, and by the end of the third movie, she's accomplished that. And one of the biggest hints in the first film that even outside of the Matrix, they still are just in another layer and they've never broken free, is that Trinity is able to kiss Neo back to life. His heart has completely stopped, and then she kisses him, which brings him back. Which, if this is supposed to be our world, but in the future, as they imply in the very beginning, that's not possible. You can't kiss people back to life. And a lot of people will want to go, well, it's just a movie, but movies still have logic to them. And so if they set up a complicated world like this and there are rules, there's a reason if they break those rules. Especially when they're consistently breaking the rules, like we see this happen again later in the other films. Just like in the second movie, when we see that Neo brings Trinity back to life by saving her inside of the Matrix. Now that doesn't make any sense. How would you be able to save someone in the Matrix and have an effect on them outside of the Matrix, somewhere like Zion or otherwise, if they're disconnected? She's not disconnected. And Neo realizes this by the third movie, but he completely doesn't understand when the architect is talking to him in the second film, because the architect tells Neo that he's one in a line of many, that he's an anomaly that they know is going to pop up and that they prepare for it. And that's why on all of the televisions they can map all of the things he could or might say. They have run through this over and over, which lends to, like I said, is Neo potentially a simulation? But throughout the entire second film, Neo doesn't understand what the architect is telling him. That's why he just keeps going, Trinity? Because he is still trapped. But that's part of it, is that he has convinced himself so much that he's broken out, that even when he's confronted with someone telling him that he is part of this system, they knew he was coming and there's defenses against him, he doesn't understand that he was planned for. And the filmmakers also tried to hint at this with certain shots. Like once when we're in Zion, we see that everyone is partying in the second film, and that they're dancing and grinding, and it's very much like a club. And it looks very similar to the club that Neo was in when he first met Trinity inside of the Matrix. And there's a reason why they're trying to show this parallel. It's because they're still feeding into all of the human desires while they're in Zion that they enjoyed in the Matrix, because they're still addicted and in this system. They wanted to break out and they wanted to fight back. So the Matrix has created a layer for them where they get to do just that. They get to fight infinitely because them taking out agents really doesn't matter. And they get to jump back and forth. And so they're spinning their wheels without going anywhere. And the whole time they think that they've broken free. And this is what happens to the people who get caught up in the red pill culture of the Matrix. They think that they've broken free. They think that they're beyond all of the things that control us, but they still are obsessed with materialism, how they look, impressing other people, getting status symbols. None of these things actually matter. But because they're still caught up in the Matrix, but thinking that they had broken out into Zion, well, they're still doing all of the things that they would have done in the Matrix. And in the third movie, Neo starts to understand that he is still in the Matrix even when he's in Zion. We see that in the first film, he gets the spoon from the boy who tells him there is no spoon, meaning that the things that you see while you're inside of the Matrix, they don't exist. And that you can act as a creator in this space, as he shows him with bending the spoon with his mind. And in the third movie, while Neo is in Zion, he gets a spoon sent to him from that same boy. Now, this spoon looks like it was handmade and that it exists in the world of Zion, but that's the point. That spoon doesn't exist. Neo is just in another layer, and that's what the boy is trying to tell him by sending him this spoon. And Neo starts to understand this later, and that's why he can manifest his powers inside of Zion. The power that he has inside of the Matrix, he also has in Zion because it's all part of the Matrix. That's why he's able to take out the Sentinels with his hands. That's why he's able to see without his eyes. We can't do that in the real world. You can't see fire people inside of other people. This is also why Agent Smith is able to possess Bane, who's in Zion. A program can't take over a human. How would that be possible in the real world, that a program could just take over a human? And if that was an option the entire time, why not just put human bodies inside the Matrix with programs for minds so they never want to break out? A virus coming out of a computer and taking over your mind is not possible unless you're part of the Matrix. And the same thing with Neo using his powers to see Smith while he doesn't have eyes, as well as when he takes down the Sentinels with his hands. He shouldn't have powers inside of Zion unless he's still in the Matrix. And when I've talked about this before on my TikTok, people push back and they say, well, Neo has Bluetooth, it's a Wi-Fi signal, and they'll just bend rationality as far as they possibly can in order to keep their preconceived bias. Because if they realize that Neo never escaped the Matrix in the movie, and they've been trying to follow this roadmap that's been set out by red pillars and the like, then they have to admit, if Zion is really in the Matrix, it means they never broke free, and they want to keep their bias, so they will reject it any way they can. This is very similar to in the first film, when Morpheus says they stop taking people out of the Matrix at a certain point because their minds can't handle it and they won't accept that reality. The same thing happens when people try to confront this idea of Neo never escaping. Unless you're willing to be honest with yourself, of course you'll never escape. Neo doesn't have powers because of Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, it's because Zion is in the Matrix. Everything that we see in the entire trilogy all takes place in one layer or another of the Matrix. Because if Neo did have Bluetooth or Wi-Fi allowing him to have these powers, why wouldn't the Sentinels just hack his mind instead of physically attacking? They would have never needed to enter Zion, they could have just fried everybody's brains from a distance. And while we do see that humans have been mechanized and there's been machinery put into us so that we can connect into the Matrix, there's no implication throughout the films that the machines can actually control humans. That's why they have to have agents, and that's why the agents can take people over. But this only works inside of the Matrix. They aren't possessed in their pods, if that was in fact the real world. And at the end of the film, even Morpheus knows that it's not real. That's why he turns around and asks somebody, is this a dream? Because he knows on some level that this was all concocted, but he doesn't understand that it's part of a bigger plan. So the machines originally, like I said, tried to make Earth perfect, and it didn't work and people didn't accept it. So they made a more chaotic world, and they found that some people still didn't accept it. Considering that the machines were more powerful than us, smarter than us, and would think further into the future, this whole thing has been a setup to create a matrix that humans want to stay in. So we wouldn't accept a perfect matrix when it hadn't been earned, but if humans were able to break free, rebel, take over, and then think that they've broken out of the matrix, well then they would stop trying to look for an exit. They would stop fighting, and they would actually live in that world happily. And this is cemented by the ending conversation between the architect and the oracle. He walks over to the oracle and tells her that it was a very dangerous game she was playing, because they had manipulated humans and let them have a little bit of freedom in their system. Because the humans came close to figuring out what was actually going on, but they got what they wanted. It was this idea of a savior, of someone to martyr themselves for everyone else. And that's exactly what Neo was. And that's why we see all of this Christian iconography at the end of the film, is because that's what they expected. He is fulfilling the savior or Christ-like prototype. Because a lot of people do want a savior. They want somebody to come and rescue them, that there's a chosen person that's going to come and fix everything. And that keeps the majority of people inactive. They're sitting there waiting for a savior. And so the whole time the machines were giving the humans what they were expecting to get them to the ends that they wanted. And this is why the architect tells the oracle that she played a very dangerous game, and he's right. And then he asks her how long does she think that this peace will last. And to that she doesn't have an answer, because this is new territory for the machines. Because they're trying a new tactic to keep us locked in the matrix to see if it will make us happy and that we'll stop looking for the exit. And most likely those people would stop looking for an exit. Because every time they question why are things so good, why do we live in a perfect world like the original Matrix, then they can point back to, well, somebody sacrificed himself for all of us to have this. And then they stop looking, and they will happily live inside the Matrix just like the machines want. And it's too bad that Neo didn't listen to the architect in the second film, because he would have realized that he wasn't fighting back. He was walking a path that they had set up for him. But this path was slightly different than all the others. And so at the end, Neo never escapes. Nobody does. They just break into a new layer, and it's just a new layer of control. It's much like if a chicken broke out of a slaughterhouse. They would still be caught up by the fence that makes up the farm, but they got out of the initial cages, so they think they're free. Well, I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. I'm going to have more Matrix content coming soon, talking about all of these concepts and applying them to philosophy, as well as looking at what does this look like in our world, and how can you metaphorically break out of the Matrix. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell on your way out. And drop me a comment and let me know what you think of this theory. I also have a members profile and a Patreon and a TikTok. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.